Hi, I'm Gary Jobson, your host for Sailing Quarterly Video Magazine. As you're about to see, Sailing Quarterly will entertain you and make you a better sailor. You subscribe to Sailing Quarterly just like a printed magazine, only Sailing Quarterly comes out 4 times a year on video cassette. Subscribers receive and collect a new 60-minute edition every 3 months, and in each issue we have between 6 and 8 different segments which I guarantee will captivate you. In each issue we take a look at a new exciting cruising destination with an expert like Tristan Jones or Hal Roth, and we have close-up action of one of the world's major yacht racing events. Whether you're a novice or an expert, Sailing Quarterly will help you learn more about our sport. In each videotape, I have a regular column on racing tips, and Don Street has instructional cruising segments. Also, each issue has special features, product reviews, and maintenance tips to help you keep your boat looking beautiful. When you subscribe to Sailing Quarterly, you'll receive an exciting new issue every 3 months. And to make your Sailing Quarterly video library more useful, our stories are indexed with a minute number in the corner of the screen. Now, our table of contents and these minute numbers help you quickly find the stories that you want to watch again and again. In past issues, world-renowned author and Caribbean sailing veteran Don Street has shown us how to tie handy knots, how to anchor properly, how to sail with kids, and much more. Let's listen in.
The last 2 issues, we showed you how to prepare for heavy weather. Now, in this issue, we'll show you the tactics, how to reduce your headsail size, how to move your sheet leads, how to single reef, how to steer in heavy weather, how to stream a gale rider. When the wind starts blowing up, time comes to shorten down. To reef a roller reefing headsail, the thing to do is to turn downwind, not into the wind. If you have a good helmsman, he can blanket the sail behind the mainsail, so it is a very simple job to roll up. Whereas if you try to roll it up when you're headed into the wind, it can be a real gut buster. You should have the sailmaker put 2 stripes on it, showing where the first reef will come and the second reef will come. And then work out on your boat where the sheet lead should be moved to line up with those reef points. To reef a jib, you've got to move the sheet lead. This is essential, or otherwise you get the foot of the sail gets too tight and the leech falls off. The various ways of doing this: some boats have a number of sliders, others have spare sheets and spare winches, but if you only have 1 slider and 1 winch, all is not lost. You take an extra line to a cleat, tie it off, then tie a rolling hitch around the sheet. You start off with a half hitch. Then you tie another hitch on top of it, and you jump it over so it's in the opposite direction of the strain is coming on your line. Another one, because it's blowing hard, and I'll even put a 4th one in here to make sure it doesn't slip. And now we're in the position where we can slack the sheet, take the load on this new sheet, and move the slider. Okay, and then we can move our car. Now we'll show you how to single reef. In this case, everything is pre-marked. The lines are color-coded. Blue for the first reef, red for the second reef, green for the third reef. And the jammers are set up the same way, so you can't make a mistake and open up or close the wrong jammer when you're reefing. This is different from the normal method of reefing, as we don't use the horns, and we take down on the clew first, and we tighten the luff of the sail by heaving down on the tack rather than heaving up on the halyard. In this case, what we do is the first thing we do is blow the boom bang or take up on the topping lift to lift the end of the boom. Then we drop the halyard to the mark, and at the same time we dump the main sheet so the sail is flogging. We then grab the clue reefing line and heave away on it. Take it around a winch. As soon as the black mark appears, a line is taken through the tack earring and heaved right down to a winch, and that heaves the luff up tight. At that point, you start trimming the main and take up on the boom bank. It's much easier to haul down on the tack earring than it is to try and heave the halyard up tight against the friction of all the slides. This method we have been using on Idyllic for about 10 years, and it beats the hell out of the old method we used for the previous 25 years. When it really begins to blow, the first thing to do is make sure you get rid of your big headsail. Either roll it tightly around your roller reefing gear, or if it's on a foil or hanked on, get it off and get it down below. And shorten down early on in to reef main and staysail. Now the average cruising boat with double reef main and a small hanked on staysail will certainly handle anything up to 50 knots. A heavy weather staysail should be a hanked on staysail set on the inner staysail stay. If you're a sloop rig boat, not double headsail rig, you should have a removable staysail stay which can be set up on a release lever. If you have hanked on headsails, the best thing to do in anything but the lightest of airs is to stop them up with rubber band stops. Then you can hank the sails onto the headstay, haul them up tight, secure the halyard, go back aft, and break out the sail. And you don't have a sail flogging around trying to knock someone overboard while you're trying to hoist it. As it builds more, go down to reefed staysail and double reef main. Now, if you're getting overpowered, I strongly advise setting a storm trysail and your reef staysail. Some boats will triple reef their main, but I object to that because the main's up there all the time, and the triple reef main is all too likely to blow, and then you have nothing but rivets. When steering in heavy weather, you're trying to take it easy. So when beating to windward, the best thing is ease up into the wind as you go up the waves, and as you come over the top of the wave, bear off and pick up speed. Pinch up, climbing the waves, bear off, going down the backside. If the best helmsman gets too tired, put another helmsman on, but if possible, have the best helmsman sitting there coaxing them. It blows so hard that you can't slowly work to weather or heave to, then it's time to start running off. You'd immediately get rid of the trysail. You might or might not get rid of the staysail. It depends on the boat. If you have a lot of windage back aft, you want to keep the staysail up, to keep the center of effort forward, to keep the boat from broaching. If you don't have any windage aft and you start going too fast, you'll probably take down the staysail and run off under bare poles. The subject of lying a hull comes up. Okay, in 25 knots of wind, if you want to relax, you can take everything down on heavy displacement narrow boats and lie a hull. When you get in gale conditions, lying a hull is a recipe for disaster. I could go on for hours quoting case after case after case of boats that were badly damaged lying a hull. Don't lie a hull. How to slow the boat down. Take your mooring lines, secure them on one side of the stern, feed them over the stern in a bight. Take your Dranford anchors with the chain on them, shackle them onto a snatch block, drop the snatch block over the anchor line, and throw the mess overside. Dranford anchors work like very nice water skis and create a tremendous drag. If you have a gale rider, which we will demonstrate to you, use the gale rider. We're taking our nice long anchor line, securing it to the swivel with a fisherman's bend, The fisherman's bend jams up and won't chafe through. And then we'll do the poor man's mouse. Line his mouse. Now, one person will toss this overside. I will be forward with this line around the winch, and we'll surge it on out. We've got the line faked out, as feeding 200 feet of line off a coil is a guaranteed way to get a jam. But faked out this way, it should feed out without much problem. And it seems to have stopped us just about dead. It's knocked us down from 6 knots to about 2. It will obviously slow you down when you're running off before a gale. There is a tremendous amount of strain on this line. We're around a nice solid winch, but obviously we don't tie it off to a self-tailer. The correct thing to do is to tie it off with a towboat hitch. The most important thing is you've got to watch for chafe. Best thing for chafing gear is take strips of canvas, wrap them around the line and tie it with marlin where it's chafing. But even that will start chewing its way up. So the thing to do is you do about 6 foot of chafing gear, and every half hour ease it out another couple of inches, and you end up on a new piece of chafing gear. These are the techniques I've used, and I guess they must be valid because I got roughly half a century of sailing behind me and I'm still here. Just remember, sailors have weathered thousands of gales at sea and most of them are still around. This is Don Street. See you next issue.
Except for Native Americans who were here to greet Christopher Columbus or the Vikings, everyone came from somewhere else. And whether the ties to the old country are relatively recent or from generations past, everyone wonders about the old family tree. Our first story is about a woman who decided to trace her roots and visit old family members that she hasn't met before in Norway. And when she found out that they were all sailors, there seemed no better way to get to know each other than to take a 10-day charter cruise along Norway's southern coast. Norway, the land of fjords, Vikings, blonde hair, the midnight sun, and a rich seafaring heritage dating back centuries. To explore this unique world, we flew into Oslo and then made connections to Kristiansand. We joined Phil Friedman and Karen Josephson as they chartered a boat from Sail Scandinavia and embarked on an odyssey to rediscover Karen's ancestral roots buried deep in the Norwegian soil.
My father was Norwegian. It was particularly exciting for me to come to Norway and see many of the traditions that I had grown up with as a child. The first day we went to the open market in town and there was beautiful fruits to provision. That was our first experience with how clean the Norwegian shops were and beautiful flowers everywhere.
The plan for our itinerary is this. We're going to sail from Kristiansand to Risør to the Wooden Boat Festival. Then we'll sail back from Risør to Kristiansand, either on the inland passage or, if the weather permits, we'll sail offshore in the Skagerrak Sea. The most impressive thing about the sailing that we learned the first day was these are very difficult waters to navigate. The channel is frequently very narrow, and it's often necessary to go between rocks that are no more than 10 or 15 meters apart. It's exciting and very picturesque. I've never seen so many wooden boats in my entire life. It was amazing to see the blend of the old Norwegian sea tradition that's actively alive today.
Grimstad, we stayed at the town dock. There were good facilities. It was very easy to just come up to the town dock and to tie up for a small fee. We had showers, and it was very convenient for shopping. Between Grimstad and Risør, we came out of the channel and got our first taste of the Skagerrak Sea and sailed almost into Risør and found that the boat has a very nice helm, very well balanced, and was just a dream to sail.
It's a 42-foot Grand Soleil. It's a really nice boat. It's outfitted and can comfortably sleep 6 people. Arrived at Risør, it was late in the afternoon of the first day of the festival, and all of the docks appeared to be filled up, and I was concerned that we wouldn't have anywhere to moor. And the skipper of our boat pulled it right into another boat, and before long we'd thrown lines and we'd rafted up to this other boat, which was rafted to another boat. And I was concerned that we hadn't asked permission or we hadn't done anything. We just hopped right aboard this fellow's boat. People just tie up and go across one another's boat to the shore, and that's the tradition there. It seems to work out quite well.
The boat show was like any other boat show, except all the boats were wooden. The manufacturers were there to show their wares and sell their boats like any other boat show.
The trim on the finer boats was mahogany, but I was surprised to find how much pine was used in most of the boats and how well it apparently held up. Some of the boats that we saw were quite old. We saw one boat that was over 100 years old.
A lot of the boat construction was what we call the lapstrake construction, with the overlapping wooden planks from one plank to another. Colin Archer, who was the pioneer of the double-ended boats, was a Norwegian, and so you see many of those Colin Archer designs in Norway.
We learned the derivation of the terms port and starboard. In the old Viking ships, the tiller was placed on the right side, and they call it the steering board. Therefore, it evolved into the term starboard on the right. And then when they would take the boat in next to the dock so that they wouldn't injure the steering board, they would put that side against the dock, and that became known as the port side because it was against the port. Therefore, you have port and starboard. One of the most exciting things about our experience at the Wooden Boat Festival is we had the opportunity to sail on a 12-meter racing boat that was a 1933 12-meter that was completely restored and in all the original equipment that it had in 1933.
The day of the race, Karen's Norwegian cousin, Terje, arrived aboard his beautiful and racy sloop. Excited to compete with the 12 meters, we talked to him about his unique boat that had almost no freeboard.
My boat Lulu is made of mahogany and ash, and it's made about 1960 in the south of Sweden. Lulu is 40 feet long, and the beam is 6 feet and 1.5 feet above the water surface, freeboard.
We started downwind, and Lulu was able to fly her spinnaker and just move right on through the rest of the fleet. We got a little bit of a late start, but we ended up coming up, and we finished second.
They talked bad of the boat before the regatta. It's a little bit smaller than the 12 meters. It's only 40 feet. But after the regatta, they were shaking my hand.
Terje and his wife, Mariana, being on holiday and anxious to learn more about their American cousin, were eager to join us on our cruise back to Kristiansand.
We left Reeser, and we'd been there for 2 or 3 days, and the festival was fun, but we were anxious to get underway. And the breeze was fresh, and we were anxious to see what the boat could do.
We wanted to see if we could sail closer in the fjords. And sailing in the fjords was kind of tricky in order to keep the sails at a wing and wing because the fjord winds, as Terry kept reminding us, shift around the islands. The anchoring techniques are very different than we have had on other charters.
They would drop an anchor on the way in and then bring either the bow or the stern right into the cliffs all up and down the coast. You could camp there for free, and they were very well maintained. They had toilets, they had trash containers. They were absolutely immaculate, and really a beautiful place to camp. It was fun to get off the boat once in a while and regain your land legs, and we could hike up to the top of the islands, and from there you could see many, many islands in every direction and all the old sea marks and see all the little fjords. It was just really great to get off the boats and hike around.
On one of the islands, we counted, and you could see at least 27 other little islands. In Linger, we went to a restaurant that is well known called the Blue Lantern, and the owner of the Blue Lantern met us in costume and gave us a tour of the city.
Now it's just living 110 people here, and they are living on the old islands, the 5 islands, and so they have to use their boats all the time.
We left Lingor and continued up the channels, leisurely exploring the many beautiful anchorages. We certainly felt no rush since in August, the sun sets around 11 p.m. and rises again at 5 a.m.
Every night or in the morning, we would swim right off the boat. The weather was still very, very nice, and the water temperature is around 66 degrees. And we really had beautiful anchorages.
Arundel's a small village off about halfway between Risør and Kristiansand that was known as the Venice of Norway. It had some canals that used to go into the town where the boats would go on in. It was a very picturesque town, and we pulled right into the harbor, and we were able to get what few provisions we needed a few feet from the boat, and we're back on our way.
So we left Arundel with fine weather and headed back onto the Skagerrak Sea to return to Kristiansand. Norway, from the fjords to the markets, to the wooden boats and friendly people, had proved a wonderful cruising ground, and Karen and Terje relished their opportunity to reestablish their family ties. Welcome aboard the J35 Cheers. One of the most exciting times during any sailboat race is setting a new sail like a spinnaker. If you do it well, it's one of the highlights of sailing. But to do it well takes a lot of crew coordination, and the key is for every crew member to have a specific job. It all starts with the helmsman who sets the pace. His first priority is boat speed. The second priority is position, and the third is to worry about setting new sails. Now, while the helmsman concentrates on boat speed and watching the wind and the sails, it's the tactician that watches for position and where you're going to be heading after making the spinnaker set. Moving forward, you have the sail trimmers. When you're bearing off in a sailboat, you want to ease the mainsail out fast. This helps the boat to turn quickly, and you get to use a little less rudder. Remember, the rudder on a sailboat always acts as a brake, so the less you can use, the more speed you'll keep. One of the keys for the sail trimmers is to understand the course that's going to be steered after the spinnaker set. If the boat is on a reaching course with the wind coming from the side, the spinnaker pole will be right on the headstay. However, if you're going to a run where the spinnaker pole will be aft, the sail trimmer needs to know that so he can adjust the spinnaker pole and his guy before you get to the mark. For the jib trimmer, when the sail is going up, only ease the jib out about 1 to 2 feet. If you go out too far, sometimes the jib itself will get over top of the spinnaker sheet and you won't let that spinnaker fly. Moving forward, we are now in the pit area of the boat. This is the nerve center of any boat. The person in the pit must handle the halyards and watch to make sure that the jib comes down just as the spinnaker gets to the top of the mast. Spinnakers often have trouble flying unless you drop that forward sail down on the deck. Once you do that, the wind catches the sail and it will fly easily. Moving further forward, we have the mast man. This is the person who hooks the spinnaker pole up to the mast and actually pulls the sail up. When you pull the spinnaker up, you'll want to make long, hard pulls, getting as much halyard as you can. Once you start pulling the spinnaker up, pull as fast as you can until the spinnaker's at the top of the mast, and you should know this because you have pre-marked halyards. When it comes time to raise the pole, the pitman and the mastman have to work together to get the pole up in the air. Moving further forward, the bowman has to be nimble and quick, stay on his toes, and carefully watch what's happening. He feeds the spinnaker out of the bag, and he is responsible for hooking the spinnaker up. There's probably no more embarrassing moment than pulling a spinnaker up and suddenly realizing when it's too late that the spinnaker is going up sideways. If you do that, you'll end up on the cover of your yacht club yearbook. So it's really important to mark the spinnaker carefully. Head for the top of the sail, clues for either edge. It's important for the bowman to choose his time hooking up the spinnaker and the spinnaker pole carefully. You do not want to go forward immediately after attack while you're trying to gain speed, and you also don't want to go forward when you're in set of waves. It's best to do it when the boat is at full speed, everyone else is up on the windward rail, and the boat is in smooth water. That way you'll lose less distance. The key to any good maneuver is preparation in advance. In the pit, you want to make sure that all your lines are carefully coiled or flaked so they're ready to run. It's up to the bowman and the sail trimmers to check the guy and sheet to make sure that they're clearly led outside around the shrouds and led to the spinnaker. Do not raise the spinnaker pole up until the last possible moment. When a spinnaker pole is on the mast and up in the air, it creates windage, so you want to raise that as late as you possibly can. But in any case, it's best if you have the spinnaker completely ready to go, the pole hooked up and on the mast and raised, the guys and sheets led, and everybody in position 2 boat lengths before the mark, so that when you make your actual rounding, everyone on the crew can concentrate on making a fast set while the helmsman and the sail trimmers can concentrate on speed. Now, one of the biggest mistakes you can make when you're setting a new sail is to do it too early. Sometimes you get so anxious to get that sail up, you'll pull it up before you get to the mark and the spinnaker gets away from you. So the key is to almost wait till you're on the course you're going to be sailing on before getting the spinnaker to the top of the mast. It's also important to understand not to pull the spinnaker up until everybody's ready. The key to a fast spinnaker set is the preparation before you get to the mark. So during the actual rounding, you can concentrate on speed and the tactician can watch your position. There are 3 places to put a spinnaker when you're setting it up. In a match race, you would take the spinnaker and place it in the bow, so when you come around the windward mark, you can be prepared to go on either jibe. And often in a match race, when it's close, you don't know which jibe you're going on until the last possible instant. However, in fleet racing, you have a little bit more time to get the spinnaker ready. It's best if you're going to be doing a jibe set to keep the spinnaker on the windward side so the bowman has his way to windward too. But if you're going to set it to leeward on the port side when you're rounding a mark to port, the bowman should minimize the amount of time he's on the leeward side of the boat. One of the keys to keeping a spinnaker from wrapping is to separate the clews of the sail. So the guy and the sheet should be trimmed simultaneously to get the clews to separate. It also helps to drop the jib quickly so the wind catches the sail and doesn't allow it to wrap. The reasons for a wrap are either that the spinnaker set was made too early or the jib is up and the spinnaker wraps inside itself and the wind is never allowed to catch the sail. And of course, there's one more reason. If the spinnaker's not packed correctly to start with, it could go up in a lot of knots, something that happens quite often.
Well, that's it. Good luck with your spinnaker sets, and next issue we'll look at the flip side of the story, spinnaker takedowns.
This issue, we're going to look at the new Sabre Targa 34. Sabre have built 486 34-footers, and with this boat they introduce the aft cabin version. The boat has more beam, more sail area, it has a wing keel, it has an aft cabin, turning it into a very much more powerful, cruising-oriented sailing boat. Every boat's a compromise, and different owners like to have different things in their boat. They have different reasons for buying that particular boat. And here we'll talk to Mike and Mary DeBono about why they chose the Sabre 34.
We did look at other boats. We looked at Tartan, CNC. We felt that this was the most boat for the money, and we wanted the aft cabin.
One of the other reasons that we liked this boat too was the wing keel. Here on Cape Cod and cruising the Sound, there's an awful lot of shoals. So we can change our courses a little bit more and get into a few more gunk holes that we couldn't get into before. It makes it a little bit nicer.
We talked to a lot of Sabre owners around the Nantucket Sound area where we sail. Everyone was impressed with their boat. We didn't hear one complaint with the boat. On checking with the different trade magazines past few years, we kept noticing the high resale value of Sabre, which was really main ingredient for us to make up a decision on buying a Sabre, because we do plan on stepping up in 3 or 4 years to a bigger boat.
Right. We're in the aft cabin of the Targa 34, and this is the area of primary difference between the 34 Classic and the 34 Targa. The new hull on the Targa is much beamier in the stern, allowing for a double berth back here. Most double berths are about 60 to 75 inches wide. This particular one is 60 inches. Quite a bit of storage in the aft cabin here. We have lockers along this side with sliding doors, so you can put anything that's likely to fall out and hurt you in the locker. You can put books flat on top of the shelf, and forward of that you have a small hanging locker. Notice the oil teak finish with an inlaid ash strip to accent it. The lower part of the hull is an easily cleaned fiberglass interior pan. We're at the forepeak of the Sabre 34, and as you can see, it's quite comfortable. There are 2 full-length berths up here. There's a small sink on the port side and a hanging locker on the starboard side. The sink has a small seat in front of it to give you a little bit of storage space underneath. The rest of the interior is oil teak. We have storage this side, storage on the other side, more locker space under the sink. The 34 has all the features you'd find on a larger boat. It has the U-shaped dining area, the large table. It has an L-shaped galley. It has a separate navigation area, and it has a private aft head, but it's all compact. On many 34-foot boats, the navigation area is situated at the bottom of the bunk because there just isn't that much room in the boat. This boat has a nav area which is compact, but it's entirely separate from the rest of the boat, immediately across from the galley. Plenty of room for instruments, the switch panel, and the EPIRB stove back here. The rest of the boat feels compact. It has everything you want in the boat, but it just feels that it could be slightly larger. But that's part of the problems of having a lot of stuff in a 34-foot boat. Well, now it's time to go out and go sailing and see how the boat handles. The boat feels very comfortable to sail. There's almost no helm, and which is what it should be in about 9 knots of wind. We're doing about 4.2, 4.3 in 9 to 10 knots of wind. The headstay is a little slack. I think we would point a little better and sail a little better if we had a little bit more backstay tension. But other than that, we feel pretty comfortable. It's a 130 Genoa and a full mainsail we're using at this point in time. The breeze has come on a little stronger now. It seems that with the 130 Genoa, you really need that extra 2 knots of wind, 2 or 3 knots of wind. The boat feels better, it's moving better. Very comfortable. And I've got a couple of degrees of helm now, which makes the boat feel, it's a better feeling to the boat when you have a couple of degrees of helm. Plus we're probably getting a little lift off the rudder, making it sail a little better to windward. Cockpit layout is very comfortable here, just sitting on the helmsman's position. My guess is it's pretty comfortable for the crew. I like this slope to the seat back, which makes it so that it doesn't dig into your side. I don't know what it's like sitting on the high side, helming the boat, but this is quite a comfortable position. You can see the Genoas nicely. You can see the spreader ends, and the shape of the mainsail is pretty easy to see from down here. Let's try sitting on the high side, see what it's like. I can see the lower telltale comfortably. I can see the complete shape of the mainsail. That's about all you really need to see. So it's still moving nicely. Let's try a tack and see how the cockpit works. Helm's over. Mary, would you get the traveler, please? Trim on. Trim on the traveler. Okay, now the boat looks a little better. On the deck layout, the halyards are led aft from the mast, making it easy to control everything. And there are 4 dorade vents up around the mid-deck, so you have plenty of ventilation going down to the middle of the boat. The side decks are wide, very comfortable to walk on, and the shrouds are set far enough inboard so it's easy to walk around the outside of them. We're looking at 15 knots of wind speed, 5.8 knots of boat speed at a wind angle of 32 degrees. That's pretty good for this boat. The boat feels very comfortable. We've got a little more helm now, so we're getting a little better lift to windward. The boat feels better all around on this tack. Actually hits 6 knots. 6 knots of boat speed, 15 knots of wind speed, wind angle of 30 degrees. The boat's motion feels very nice, a little bit of pitching because we're starting to see bigger seas now. The wing keel seems to give the boat plenty of stability, and interesting enough, when we were doing the 12-meter work, we found that the keel did give rise to some fluctuation in a very deep rudder. It doesn't feel that there's any fluctuation in this rudder at all, even though the keel is relatively shallow. Stand by about. Helm's over. Trim on. Your tacks are 70 degrees. We're doing 6.3 and 12 knots of wind at the apparent wind angle of 90 degrees. Just reaching along quite comfortably. Very little helm, very clean, little fuss in the wake. Boat is moving nicely, standing up and moving well. Very nice boat to sail, very forgiving, very comfortable. With the wing keel, you don't get a tremendous amount of heel, but you do get a reasonably good windward ability, which you could only get under a deep keel. And when you have a deep keel, that precludes getting into a lot of the gunk holes that Mike and Mary like to get into.
When the snow flies in the United States, the Southern Hemisphere is the place to be. So in January, Sailing Quarterly traveled down under to Sydney, Australia to watch the Sydney Harbor 18-foot skiffs. Now these boats are about the same length as the Lightning, but they're half the weight. And where a Lightning carries about 500 square feet of sail area, these boats carry 1,600 feet of sail area, and they sail at speeds of 30 knots. The main job of the crew on these boats is to keep the things from cartwheeling. So if you want a real thrill, let's go.
Lighter and no bigger than a dinghy, carrying sails nearly the size of a J-44, the 18s are the fastest monohulls on the water, reaching speeds of 30 knots, careening along a knife edge of hair-raising speed, balancing between ecstasy and disaster. Here in Sydney, we joined Julian Bethwaite, the 1991 18-foot skiff world champion, to find out more about these exciting boats.
January is a big month. It's called the Festival of Sydney. Starts New Year's Day, finishes normally on Australia Day. We've got the BOC in Sydney. We've got the 12-metre challenge. We've got the 18-footers. A lot of festivals going on in town. We have gay Mardi Gras. Good place to be this time of year. Today we will be sailing on the harbour in the company of the 12 metres, crewed by crews from all the challenging countries for the America's Cup. Should be fairly chaotic and interesting out there. Well, the 18s initially started off as the lifeboats off the square riggers that came into the harbour. About 100 years ago, a guy called Mark Foy had a race and there were no rules. So what happened was these lifeboats, 22, 24 feet long, put up ridiculous amounts of sail, and yesterday was the 99th year of that race. The 18-footer is sort of evolving on a weekly basis into a faster, quicker piece of machinery. In a good wind, I mean, you just sort of average come down wind at sort of 25, 26 knots. If you're lucky and you can survive it, you know, you can probably touch 30, 35. How long you can sustain it for, who knows? The waterline length of the boat is 18 feet. The boat must be somewhere between 6 feet and 8 feet wide. That is the actual hull. There is then that maximum wing beam width of 16 feet. We actually now have a minimum hull weight. It's actually 82 kilos, which is very close to 200 pounds. And we have a maximum mast height now of about 36 feet. Upwind with the number one rig up, Amy would probably carry 400, 450 square feet of main and jib area. The spinnaker would be very close to the 1,000 square foot point. There's no keel, there's nothing holding you upright. You sail these boats very flat. All the ballast, all the driving motion is from the crew out on the end of the wings. The centreboard weighs less than probably 12 pounds. Regularly you don't get enough time to pull the centreboard up going downwind. There's just not enough time to get a crew member in there to do it. Also, if you think about the boats going downwind, the apparent is still in front of the beam, so you need the centreboard down anyway. This is why we tack downwind. All the spinnakers are designed for basically shy reaching or very close reaching scenarios. Going upwind, the apparent wind's probably somewhere around 22, 23 degrees. Going downwind, the apparent wind only probably swings to maybe 45, 48 degrees. The only time it really gets behind you is in a jibe. They are, in fact, extremely complex pieces of machinery to design. Below hull speed, which is somewhere around 6.5 knots, of course they've got to be low drag, fairly slippery through the water. As soon as you hit your 7 knots, the thing's sort of got to come up onto the plane, in which case the nose is coming out of the water 5 or 6 feet. Then when you really do get hit by a scorcher and you do start going downwind at sort of 25, 30 knots, you need a boat which will track very true through the water, because there's just no way the skipper is good enough to keep the thing on its feet. In these bigger boats, for all sorts of reasons, one of them being wanting to get further aft to keep the nose out, they build rudder frames on the back. It also allows control. So what is actually happening here is the rudder is being swung a good 18 inches off the back of the boat. That's just so that they can keep the boat in control at speed. You can imagine at 20 knots, the movement of the rudder 5 degrees will send you into spins. So you have to be very careful to only move the tiller maybe 1/4 to 1/2 an inch. But you have to move it the right way at the right moment. This is the bowsprit off which we set the spinnaker. It is about 14 feet off the stem of the boat. The wires here are used to stop the pole coming up. Of course, once this is rigged, it has those wires which we call kickers. These wires under our feet, which are called whiskers, which run out to the wingtips. Once it's there, it's there. So you're running around the harbour with a 14-foot lance on the bow of the boat. Good fun. The bowsprit has become an extension of the boat, but the actual bow of the boat is back here. That's where the actual water is started to be moved to keep the thing afloat. So your jib takeoff points can be anything up to 18 inches off the front of the boat. One of the biggest, most difficult tasks of being a crew on an 18-footer is actually selecting the rig. You have 3 rig options. Your big rig is for light air, your medium rig is for medium air, you then have a small rig. Of course, once you've selected that rig, once you've put your number 2 rig in, say, that's it. Like you only have 1 main, 1 jib, which are permanently up. You can't get them down, you can't reef them. There's no halyards in these boats. I mean, they're up there. The only way to get them down is cut them down. And a spinnaker, and you only carry 1 spinnaker, there's not enough room for 2. So what happens is you're sitting here on the beach, there's someone on the beach you want to beat, you're sort of watching them to see which rig they're going to put in. It's a bit of a game of chicken. At some stage someone makes a commitment and then there's this mad panic to rig the boats. So you basically leave the beach with what you've got. It's part of the sail handling ethic. You know, quite often in Sydney Harbour the wind will build. So quite often by the end of the race you are over canvas, substantially over canvas, but it's just a matter of getting it around the track and getting it back home again. When we actually rigged the boats, we set the mast bend for the day's conditions. But once we've done that setting on the beach, in the same way as once we've selected a rig on the beach, you can't change it once you're out there. That's it. What you go out there is what you do the race with. The rigs are extremely light. The whole boat is extremely light and you're carrying an awesome amount of sail area. The most innovative thing which is happening this year are the masts, which are 6000 series alloy, going up to high tensile fiberglass tips, so that as the gust hits, the upper mast drops backwards and therefore flattens the sail. If you flatten the sail by easing the main sheet, the sail flogs and you can very possibly drop the mast. So it's very important to get the spring rate of that fiberglass tip correct, so that in fact as the gust hits, in fact you squeeze the main sheet on. Tightens the forestay, boat goes faster, mainsail blades out, very easy to simply tune the boat for the wind conditions, which are done with a Vang and a Cunningham control solely. There's no other controls on the boat. We're hoping that next year's 100th World Championship will probably have 30, 35 boats. They'll all be good boats, and we'll have quite a large diversity of international crews. And we are certainly looking and would be keen on getting anyone from any overseas country who wants to come down here and have a go.
So there's your invitation. If you race boats, yearn for adrenaline pumping through your veins, and have always wanted to joust, come down under and race the Sydney Harbor 18s.
If you own a fiberglass boat long enough, eventually you're going to need some maintenance to touch up small cracks and spruce up the cosmetics. And for those of you who like to do your own maintenance, we have some step-by-step instructions from Wayne Morrison, a fiberglass expert here in San Diego. It's really not too difficult. It just takes a little patience and care, and soon your boat will be looking like new.
We're here today to show you fiberglass repair. There's varying levels of fiberglass repair, and what we're attempting to show you today with a little direction, something that you might be able to do with your own boat. What we'll do is we'll start out with an antenna mount that was removed and the holes needing to be filled, fiberglass, faired, gel coat matched, rubbed out, and polished. Proper protection of your body and your skin is very important in this procedure. As you'll notice, Mario is wearing a dust mask and gloves, as these are chemicals and they will burn and infect your skin. Be careful with the fiberglass and the acetone, the catalyst. Make sure that no flammables are anywhere close to the areas in which you're working. All of these polyester-based products will come in two parts. To mix the two parts, you follow the recommendations from the manufacturer. Starting at the beginning, we'll take and clean the area with some acetone. After the acetone is dried off, we will take and we'll grind out the holes so that we'll get a good abrasive edge for the putties and the fiberglass to hold on to. After these holes are ground out, we'll take and we'll fill them with what we call a Duraglass. It's a fiber-filled putty mixture. We recommend using a fiber-filled putty in that it has a little bit more strength in its character than just a normal Bondo type of putty without any fibers in it. We'll sand this fair. Here he's using 60 grit sandpaper. You'll notice as the procedure continues, each stage, the sandpaper used to fill and feather the edges will be finer and finer. A vacuum cleaner is very important in that you must keep your area clean in order to get a nice job. Dust particles in the area will show up and you'll have little tiny bumps or pinholes in the areas in which you're trying to work. Wiping down with acetone is a good idea in that it will keep your area clean, and then your next application will go onto a clean, dust-free surface. And from that point, we'll take and cut some fiberglass to fit over the area. We recommend using the fiberglass to hold this putty in place, as the putty in and by itself would tend to want to break loose from the surface over a period of a year or so. The material that we're going to use is matte first. Apply the resin and then put the matte on top. Each layer of material is a bit larger than the previous one. We'll then take the resin roller to squeegee out all of the air so that you'll have no possibility of delaminations or peeling at a later date. After the proper drying times, which may vary anywhere from an hour to 3 hours depending on the mixture of the catalyst to the resin or the atmospheric conditions, a sunny day, a cloudy day, you then take and feather the edges of the fiberglass by sanding the fiberglass patch. Following the feathering of the fiberglass will be the application of the pink putty you see us using here. And that would be a Bondo type application for fairing over the fiberglass patch. If you just had a minor gel coat scratch, this is the point in the process that you would begin. We apply this in a very thin layer and then sand it with a very light grit sandpaper using very short strokes, very carefully sanding so as not to abrade the aluminum around or any other areas around the area you're actually trying to patch. This particular putty differs from the earlier putty we used, which was the Duraglass, in that it has no fiber fill or it has no fiberglass chopped strand mat in it. And this is the type of putty you might want to use on a very light scratch in your gel coat and your exterior surface of your vessel that you can put on and just fine feather with some real light grit sandpaper before applying some gel coat. Carefully, we take masking tape and paper and tape the areas that we want to make sure that we don't get any overspray onto when we're shooting the gel coat. As you can see, Mario is adding a number of different colors to his basic white gel coat to get a perfect color match. The average boater will be able to take one, maybe two colors, play with them a little bit, and get a good enough color match. Once the color is comfortably matched, the hardener is added to catalyze and to actually make the gel coat hard. The gel coat is then sprayed on in a small spray gun with compressed air. In any hardware store, generally can be found a Prevail type sprayer with canned compressed air in a small bottle. This will work just as well. After approximately 15 minutes or so of drying, when the gel coat is dry, basically dry to the touch, polyvinyl alcohol is necessary to go over the gel coat, as it will not dry itself in the presence of air. The polyvinyl alcohol is applied by brush, sometimes with a rag, or preferably sprayed. After approximately an hour or so of drying time, the polyvinyl alcohol film is then taken off with water. It's water soluble and can be easily washed away. At that point, we'll take some 400 wet and dry sandpaper and then block wet sand the gel coat down to a fine gloss. After the edges of the gel coat are feathered in so that you can no longer feel them with your fingertips, a gel coat type buffing compound is used to restore the gloss to the wet sanded area. As you can see in this particular instance, the final job is finished and you cannot see where the patch was applied. As you can see, Mario's done a very professional job here, but it's something that the average boater can do, taking their time and doing it step by step. Step number one would be sanding and grinding the area to be worked. Step number two will be filling and fairing the area to be worked. Step number three will be the actual application of the fiberglass. Step number four will be the fairing of the fiberglass. Step number five will be the application of the pink type putty. Step number six will be the mixing of the gel coat. Step number seven will be the application by spray of the gel coat to the repaired area. Step number eight will be the application of the polyvinyl alcohol. Step number 9 will be the wet sanding of the repaired area. Step number 10 will be the polishing of the area. Step number 11, go sailing.
For our last story in Sailing Quarterly, I'd like to introduce John Romanier. John is the author of Fastnet Force 10, the Annapolis Book of Seamanship, and several other books and videos on sailing. When we spoke to John about joining our Sailing Quarterly camera crew, he suggested cruising on his favorite waters. So let's point our bow down east and take a look at the coast of Maine.
My wife Leigh and I have come up to the central coast of Maine for a fall cruise. It's one of our favorite cruising grounds. We've chartered a Morris 36 from a company called Morris Yachts, which also builds the boat. So while we're waiting for the boat to be prepped, we're looking around the yard. I'm standing aboard a Morris 28, which will be launched pretty soon. Morris is known for boats that just feel like Maine and look like Maine. They have a traditional appearance, a traditional feel. They have a springy shear line to them, fairly traditional underbodies, and a nice, comfortable interior. One aspect of the traditional appearance of these Maine-built boats is that they're moderately heavy by contemporary standards, which means they have very full underbodies. Some of the boats also have full-length keels that go all the way back to the rudder, a very traditional appearance. And then others, like the Morris 36, have a separate rudder and keel. In this case, the rudder is protected by a skeg, which is a good idea around here. There are a lot of lobster pots and buoys you can pick up on your propeller and on the rudder, and the skeg protects the propeller and the rudder.
From Southwest Harbor, John and Leah wound their way around the jewel-like islands of the coast to explore Isle of Ho, Merchant Row, and Stonington, then returning to Somme Sound on Mount Desert Island.
When people speak of Maine, they speak of down east, and the reason is that Maine is not laid out north and south the way many people think. It's laid out east and west. So I think I first cruised up here in 19
1958 when I was a boy with my family. I was about 14. This is pretty rugged, wild territory. A lot of granite, a lot of isolated bare islands that are barely habitable even during the summer because it's so windy and chilly up here. I suppose it's the sort of thing that encourages an independence of spirit that Maine people are known for. Most of the islands have evergreens on them. There are also some leaf turning this time of year, some red and some greens, some browns to go with the evergreens. I've been here in August and the leaves have started to turn after the first northeaster. So you start to get some color even in the middle of August and late August. The rest of the weather, it can be quite warm up here in the afternoon, get quite sunny. You may even be wearing shorts on deck in July and August, and you have to be pretty brave to go swimming here. The water's quite chilly. It's in the 60s at most, even during the summer. You get some fog, which makes life interesting, and is a wonderful test of your navigation and piloting skills, but nothing to be afraid of. Radar certainly helps, and you'll see radar on almost every size of boat up here for that reason. Radar just means that you can go a little faster. The evenings are cool, which is a very nice thing on a boat, and you do need mosquito nets. But it's rough, it's beautiful, it's unlike any other part of the world that I've been in cruising. What we've been seeing on this trip is what we typically go to, the smaller towns that have none of the bright lights and shops. Oh, we're anchored off of Isle Ho and Isle Ho Thoroughfare, one of the outer islands off central coast of Maine. This is pretty far out. This town didn't even have telephone service till half a dozen years ago. But a lot of campers used to come out here because of the hiking up in the mountain.
Well, here's the church. Would you like to go up and see the church?
Yes, let's go to the church.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, it's a little more upscale. It's a pretty rough life out here. But they have small elementary schools out here. They've got churches.
Well, it says it was built in 1857.
There's a library. You're always very impressed at these places. There's always a public library and there's always a librarian, and she does everything. She sometimes runs the post office and she's the school teacher as well. So these islands were fishing and farming islands for many years. They're still occupied by a lot of fishermen. Some lobstermen will live in fairly sizable islands like this during the winter, and then during the summer go out to smaller islands. So they're closer to their traps. Here in the relatively shallow water, they use lobster traps or pots, which are wooden frame pots that everybody's familiar with, that you drop down with a bait inside it, usually a very rank piece of meat or fish. And if you watch a lobsterman over an hour or so, you'll see how quickly they work. They can go through a trap every 3 or 4 minutes. One of the nicest things you can do is go up alongside a lobsterman and hail him and ask if he'll sell you a lobster, and they'll do it. They're very friendly. You'll always get away from a lobsterman. If you need help, you'll always get help from a lobsterman, just the same way you'd give help to them. And we're all out on the sea at the same time. I used to do a lot of racing, and I enjoyed the challenge of racing, and I learned a lot in racing. Learned how to handle a boat, I think, in racing. And many racers think that cruising's kind of dull and boring, but I think some of the challenges of cruising, if you do everything under sail, are just as interesting, if not more interesting, than racing without having to worry about the competition. One of those things is anchoring under sail, or getting the anchor up under sail, or docking under sail. The technique for anchoring under sail is to come in the bare steerage way under mainsail alone. Do not drop the anchor until you're absolutely stopped. You don't have the advantage of having an engine to dig the anchor in by going in reverse, so you have to develop some sternway on the boat. One way to do it is, if there's some wind, is just let out a lot of rode and eventually she'll settle back. If the boat doesn't drop back, you should grab the main boom and pull it forward so the mainsail's backed. Don't push it, but pull it. If you try to push it, it might fill and might knock you overboard or hit you on the head. I try to pull it from the windward side, and it'll fill on the wrong side and the boat will gather sternway and start sailing backwards, and very slowly you'll start digging the anchor in. All right, now you can trim the main sheet on the winch there. Just pull it to you. All right, main coming down. To hoist the anchor under sail, the technique that works the best for me is to, just before you're ready to get going, get the mainsail up and then a lot of rode out. And bring the boat off on one tack or the other. Not with the mainsail trimmed too tight, but pretty much on a close reach. If there's any wind, she'll slowly gather headway and sail off to one side of the anchor. Then you have to tack back to get behind the anchor again, to get downwind of the anchor. So as the boat tacks, the person on the bow pulls on the anchor rode to help pull the bow around through the eye of the wind, and also to accelerate the boat as she goes through the eye of the wind. Once she's through the wind, I let the rode off until she comes around. So it's this very long series of zigzags, one side or the other, and with each zigzag you gain a little more speed and you get a little closer to the anchor. And as the boat sails over the anchor, you're using the boat's momentum to break the anchor free or to trip it. You come up right over the anchor and snub the anchor rode tight, and you should be able to back the anchor out. Ah, it's broken loose, good. For our purposes, behind each of these islands, you find a little cove to anchor in or stop off for lunch. On the Glassbury Island, on the eastern side, there's a short beach that runs for maybe 100 yards. The water's a bit chilly, so you may not spend much time swimming off it, but you can land a dinghy there and go ashore and walk through this wonderful woods that's preserved by some people who care very much about the islands here. I guess we go through here. Well, I've had my exercise. You want to go sailing again? Sure. That's called Wreck Island, so we'll stay away from it. Stonington is on Deer Isle, which is called an island, but is much more mainland than some of the other islands like Isle of Ho or Frenchboro or Swans Island. But it's your typical waterfront, fairly large town of Maine. After you've cruised out here for a week or 2 weeks and you come into a place like Stonington, it feels like you're in the middle of Times Square all of a sudden because the rest of the islands are so isolated and so lonely. Somme Sound is the only fjord, I'm told, on the whole east coast of North America, with very steep bluffs along the side, and remarkably different terrain from the other terrain that we see around here.
From Somme Sound, John and Leah returned to Southwest Harbor, completing a cruise that many feel to be among the most beautiful in the world. Well, that's Sailing Quarterly Video Magazine, and I hope you'll agree that it's the best possible way to keep up with our sport. And if you think about it, just from watching the sample edition, you're already a better, faster, safer, more knowledgeable sailor. And if you're like most sailors, you've invested a lot of time and money in our sport. So if you think about the dividends you'll receive just from watching Sailing Quarterly, you'll conclude that it's a great value, perhaps the best piece of equipment you can add to your sailing. Sailing Quarterly videotapes will help you cruise more confidently and safely. You'll save money and gain pleasure chartering by knowing what to expect and where to go. And if you race, Sailing Quarterly will help you to win races. I guarantee it. What I'd like you to do is to subscribe to Sailing Quarterly right now, and I'll send you the next 4 issues for only $99.95. I'm so confident that you'll love Sailing Quarterly that every issue is 100% guaranteed. If you don't like an issue, send it back. We'll refund your money, no questions asked. So what I'd like you to do is pick up the phone or send in your subscription card and order Sailing